It's estimated on an annual basis in South Africa we have probably 1 million accidents, maybe involving 2 million vehicles, and it costs the South African economy an estimated 300 billion rand a year. That's a lot of houses, it's a lot of schools, it's hospitals and all sorts of places that the money could be better spent. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight we use our attempt at jaws of life to extract the numbers and why we're finding why these numbers are contentious. Some suggest there's an underestimate when it comes to fatalities and the real cost of road accidents. Joining me this evening, Howard Dembovsky, Chairman of the Justice Project South Africa, and Rob Handfield-Jones, MD at driving.co.za. You're going to tell me it's an underestimate, aren't you?
Well, it most certainly is an underestimate. It's actually a guesstimate because we actually have to face facts and realize that since 2010, the calendar year of 2010, we've not had any official road death statistics, first off. Secondly, they have been doctored previously to that because unfortunately we have a corporation called the Road Traffic Management Corporation,
who were
RTMC.
Invited incidentally to come here. They politely declined. Well, it wasn't that polite, but they said no.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, that corporation had to actually show that it was achieving its mandate, which is, in fact, to reduce road fatalities in South Africa. That's one of its mandates. It has achieved nothing of the sort.
But how do we know it's achieved nothing of the sort? Because we don't have any stats.
Well, we have to actually have a look at the statistics that were released prior to that. And those statistics didn't tell a pretty story, even though it looked like it was declining. It didn't tell a pretty story because it was contradicted by the National Injury Mortality statistics.
But where do those stats come from, Rob? I mean, I suppose the best way to getting any kind of statistic is to go to where people get a financial benefit, and people would get a financial benefit if they went to the road accident fund. There you might get some kind of indication as to at least what the trends are over a longer period of time.
What you'll get there is the tip of the iceberg. The people who go and claim from the road accident funds are people who can actually get to a centre to go and claim. They're people who can be represented or can represent themselves. It represents a very small number of the actual number of traffic fatalities and traffic injuries out there. But if you go and look at the National Injury Mortality Surveillance System, that's Medical Research Council and UNISA, and they go to mortuaries and they look at non-natural deaths. And
well, they actually physically go to mortuaries and open up the drawers, as you see on CSI, and look at the physical injuries that people have incurred and said, this person was run over by a truck, a bus, or was on the back of a bakkie and was chucked out.
Or was murdered, or it was a suicide, or non-natural causes of death. And consistently they found that 28 to 29% of those non-natural deaths are related to traffic accidents. So
we have a lot of non-natural deaths.
Well, the estimate is 60 to 80,000 a year. So it's a simple calculation to take 29% of 80,000 and say, well, we have 18 to 20,000, possibly more traffic deaths. That was in 2008. Who knows what's happened since then? Because we've got proxies for road deaths. For example, the number of deaths per day over the Christmas period, it doubled. Basically from 20 in 2008 to 2012, 2013, it went up to 38.
Now, and this happens. I mean, we look over the Christmas season when there is increased police visibility, when there's increased focus, when we're told to drive carefully and not drink and drive, and we're bored to death, frankly, by the same messages, which don't appear to have
correct.
any
So
traction.
if we take that point of view, we can then say, well, if it's doubled over Christmas, it must have doubled the rest of the time of the year, and there's a compelling case to be made.
Although this last Easter wasn't so bad, was it?
Well, we don't have the actual figures for last Easter. I mean, that's another guesstimate. But there's a compelling case to be made to say that the increase in road deaths could be anything up to double 20 or 25,000 as it was in 2008.
It's grim, Howard.
Bruce, you deal with statistics. They're lies, damn lies, and statistics. And the fact is that our Easter period, for example, of monitoring has consistently been chopped down in the period of monitoring over the years. So we started off monitoring that Easter period over 10 days. Then it got cut down to 9, 8, 7,
well, the same has happened with Christmas. Christmas was 46 days in 2008, and that dropped to 38 days in 2013. That's why I'm talking about deaths per day, because if you take the death toll over the period, it's almost meaningless.
And then we need to look at something else. Consistently in the road traffic reports from the RTMC, Christmas is not your fatal season. July is. And that is a very interesting thing because I didn't hear any noise being made in July.
Why is July
about
the
anything.
season? There's more darkness morning and night?
It must have. other influences, and those influences obviously have to be environmental influences, engineering influences, etc.
If we had the stats, we'd know.
But we don't have these stats. We have to go suck it out our thumbs.
Okay, so what we got is we're punching in the dark here. We don't know what the stats are, so we're having a jolly good go at what we believe to be a very serious problem. All of us have lost people that are near and dear to us on South African roads, and all of us drive on these roads on a regular basis. Ultimately, it's up to you and me, though. Surely, if I drove like less of an idiot and was a little bit more on time for my meetings, perhaps I would lessen my chances of being involved in an accident. Is it up to us, or is there a bigger picture?
4 E's to road safety. Those are engineering, education, enforcement and evaluation.
Okay,
when last did you see a traffic cop anywhere but in a bush?
Or at a roadblock, looking to pick up some traffic fines,
yes.
or
Well,
some
exactly.
Well, there's an even simpler answer to this. And worldwide, people will only drive as badly as their governments let them. So if you go to the UK or the USA, you will find that the general standard of driving, and those people are not much different to you or I, is much higher. Whereas in South Africa, it's
the issue of moving violations, and our traffic cops are incapable of monitoring people crossing solid lines, jumping traffic lights, the simple stuff.
Pedestrians running across freeways. Let's remember that consistently 40% of those killed on our roads are pedestrians.
Yeah. People who shouldn't be
But yet,
where they are. Yes.
when you report that there are pedestrians running across the freeway, nothing's done about it. It's illegal for them to be on the freeway, but nothing's done about it. And, you know, it's all very well and good to say, take responsibility, but let's have a look at a country like Sweden, okay, where they decide...
Sweden is, I mean, God created Sweden, and that was perfect, and then he made the rest of us do it.
Well, let's look at Sweden. Let's look at Sweden. What Sweden did is it turned around and said, you know what, we're blaming the wrong people. Let's shift the blame. We are now shifting the blame completely to service providers. So they said police, engineers, road traffic authorities, road builders, etc., etc. You are now responsible for the deaths on our roads. And miraculously, in 20 years, they managed to reduce their road fatalities by 97%. South Africa can dream on about reducing its fatalities by 50% by 2020.
I mean, we are ultimately, all of us have got 3-year-olds locked up inside us when we get to behind the wheel, and unless we are disciplined in a particularly effective fashion, we tend to break the rules from time to time, some more often than others, and that is the real issue. But it comes to engineering. I mean, South Africa's road services, other than on the tolled roads, tend to be, look how it is about red rag to bulls. And the government will argue we just don't have the budget for it. We just don't have the budget to do the road surfacing effectively enough.
Absolute
Well, if you
utter
go and
rubbish.
have a look at what causes crashes, that, you know, we have good data from sort of pre-1998.
Sure.
And talking about the Sweden experience, South Africa has had that experience. In 1983, they decided they're going to do something about it. They got very serious. We had a National Year of Road Safety in 1984. They rewrote legislation. They changed the driver's test. They reorientated enforcement. And you see the fatality rate just plummet. And then there were a whole bunch of things that happened in the mid-90s which caused that corner to be turned. And the fatality rate went up again by 2, possibly 3 times.
The solution, and I've heard various ministers of transport suggest we should reduce the speed limits. So you reduce the speed limit from 120 on highways down to 100, say, and in urban areas from 60 to 40.
Well, they've done that. In 2001, there was a very high-profile bus crash in the eastern part of Mpumalanga, where
yes,
27 tourists
absolutely.
were killed. What did they do? They reduced the maximum speed for all public transport vehicles from 120 to 100. 5 years on.
Have you been overtaken by a bus recently? I have. Yes.
5 years on, look at the fatality rates for buses. From 2005 to 2006, the fatality rate for buses climbed by 30% in a single year. So there's the effectiveness of speed control as a road safety strategy. You need to look at how people are driving and why they are driving the way they do, and we can't exclude the discussion of licensing from that.
And licensing, of course, I mean, that comes to enforcement, maybe evaluation. I've got a driver's license that is probably...
Which you got when? In what vehicle?
In a Toyota Hilux Bucky in a small town in the Free State when I was 18.
Which allows you to
That's
drive a
long time ago.
Lamborghini.
It does. But our Lamborghini is the problem. In some cases, I guess they are.
Well, that's an interesting discussion because they probably
if I'm
aren't
driving a
the
£3
problem.
million rand car, I'm going to drive it very carefully, yes.
Is that why you bought it?
That's precisely why I have three, just in case I do crash one.
But the whole issue there is, taking the freeway speed limits. I mean, if you go and have a look at a graph of what speed fatalities happen at what speed is a traffic crash uniformly fatal, it's about 115 to 120 k's an hour, sensed impact. But look at what percentage of fatalities happen at those speeds. It's negligible. The majority of fatalities happen at perceived speeds of between 38 and 65 kilometers an
No
hour.
seatbelts.
That's why 64 k's an hour was chosen as the Euro NCAP crash test speed, because that's where you're most likely to crash.
And die. But here's another thing. We talk about engineering, and it's actually very interesting because we have a particular corridor in South Africa which is known as the corridor of death, and that's Malota Road.
Yes.
So,
Langsburg as well, but Malota Road.
let's talk about Malota Road for a second here, because we have fatal head-on collisions taking place all the time there. So our solution to that, and I'm going to talk about we don't have money, has been to plan a rail corridor and to extend the solid white line by 1.5 kilometers in a particular area.
Because that will stop people from crossing it.
In Sweden, what they did in high head-on crash zones is they mounted steel wire barriers in the middle of the road so that you couldn't overtake. That is an engineering solution, and it costs a truckload less than a rail corridor.
Completely. But in South Africa,
great idea.
In South Africa, the steel wire would be stolen.
No, it would not, because I can show you examples of where it exists and where it has existed now for several years, and it hasn't been touched because it's difficult as hell to cut that stuff.
But again, you need statistics to enforce this, to inform this. In the previous stats we used to have, you could break it down by municipality and even into smaller fragments, and you could say that portion of road we've got the data, do something.
But they make
we don't
municipal
have that
managers
anymore.
responsible for it, and start it at that level and say you must implement these measures.
Well, they need the stats first.
Yeah.
The seat warmers that occupy the Department of Transport, the RTMC, and all of these SOEs should have their rear ends put on the line, and they should be told, this is your target. You reduce this many fatalities, you keep your job. You don't, bye-bye. We'll get
At this
somebody
point,
who will.
we run the risk of crashing into the next show. So it's been wonderful, it's been interesting, it's illuminating, massively depressing, and I thank you both for this. But absolutely, it's about the Minister of Transport taking responsibility, personal responsibility and personal culpability for your and my safety. Rob Handfield-Jones is the Managing Director at driving.co.za, and Howard Dembovsky, Chairman of the Justice Project South Africa. Thanks for watching. Stay safe on the roads. Do wear your seatbelt and don't be a twit. Good night.